Welcome back. We're talking about the removal of chemical weapons in Syria and the ongoing civil war there. Joining us from Damascus is an advisor to the Syrian Ministry of Information and the director of Damascus University's Center for Strategic Studies, Bassam Abu Abdullah. And right here with me in Washington, a senior political advisor and government relations director for the Syrian American Council, Mohammed Ghanem. Thanks, gentlemen, to both of you for joining us. Dr. Abdullah, I want to start with you. Let's listen to what the Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons had to say. Let's watch.
Clearly, we cannot say as the Secretariat of the OPCW that Syria doesn't possess any chemical weapons anymore. We can't say it for any country, actually. But there are mechanisms in place that may be invoked if there are any suspicions about this.
So, Dr. Abdullah, the question is, the UN cannot say at this stage whether all of Syria's chemical weapons have been destroyed, have they?
I think what the obligations of Syria is already realized by the agreement with this organization. But to make chemical weapons, it's possible. Nowadays, you know that Al-Qaeda has opportunity to have chemical weapons. But Syria now is or already signed the agreement with the United Nations with this organization, which is a very important step, and it means that through this agreement, the organization has the right to, in coordination with the Syrian government, to observe and to see what is the development in this file. I think that Syria already finished this file, and to say that that this file is not closed is I think one of the political instruments or tools to have pressure on the Syrian government, which one of the different tools which they are using generally through international organization. Anyway, I think that either Syria realized this program with the United Nations before either the time schedule finished. This is a very good step, and I think it should be appreciated, especially the role which played the superpower like Russia, United States, and either China, which we should appreciate the role of China in this file. Anyway, I think this file should be closed, and because Syria, as I mentioned before, that Syria is a part of the international agreement, which there are obligations and rights through these agreements.
All right, so I want to get the view of Mohammed Ghanem now, sitting with me in the studio. Can the government of Bashar al-Assad be trusted?
The government of Bashar al-Assad in Damascus cannot be trusted, and sadly, nothing could be further from the truth. The same regime that Mr. Abdullah works for decades, denied even possessing these whole stockpiles that the OPCW has hold out of Syria right now. The regime has a history of playing fast and loose with the facts, so we just don't know. Yes, the Assad regime has given up 100% of the declared stockpiles, but that's what we know of. And we do have reason to believe that the Assad regime is still holding on to some of their chemical weapons. A few very important lessons to learn. Number one, this deal would not have happened had it not been for the credible threat of the use of force. So the regime, again, denied. The Syria's program was shrouded in secrecy for decades, and the regime denied possessing chemical weapons. And it was only when the credible threat of the use of force was on the table that they acknowledged having those chemical and biological weapons, and then later gave them up. So credible threat of the use of force, that's a very important component of this deal. That's number one. Number two, the Assad regime recently has been relying more on the use of chlorine gas in attacks against civilians throughout Syria. So yes, the Assad regime may have given some of their mustard and sarin gas, but the Assad regime still possesses chlorine gas, and chlorine gas has been used in Kafr Zeta and Hama, elsewhere, and this basically undermines the deal, because chlorine gas is a chemical weapon. It may not be on the same level as...
That's right, technically, or legally rather.
Sadly, that makes no difference for a civilian that gets gassed.
Exactly. Look, there are two big issues I want to talk about concerning Syria today, and I want to move on to the other issue right now. And Dr. Abdullah, I want to move on to the $500 million that the U.S. government is going to provide to train and arm rebels who want to overthrow the government of President Bashar al-Assad. What do you make of this allocation of money from the United States?
Generally, I will mention what our colleague, Mr. Mohammed Al-Ghanem, he said, about the chlorine and this disinformation, which I think Roland Fabius, he mentioned that, and he said that we have no facts about the using of chemical weapons. Either I should mention the article of Seymour Hersh, who said who used
this was completely debunked. This was ridiculed by experts in the West.
But for the moderate opposition, this is a last joke, which President Obama now making. There is no moderate opposition in Syria who has the weapons. I think we can see the Jaish al-Islam and the Daesh and al-Nusra. And if President Obama considering these people moderate, I think that something amazing and it's funny for everyone. I think Robert Fisk, he mentioned that in his article in The Independent, that this is the last joke. I think the United States should stop this story, and they will, and they should look into the realization of politics.
I just have to mention quickly.
Reality.
Just one moment.
They cannot ignore the reality. President Assad re-elected, and I think the Western countries at the end of the day,
that was called an election farce. That was called a joke. In fact, if you're talking about jokes, I just have to mention quickly that the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights yesterday said that as many as 7,000 Syrians, most of whom are rebels fighting to overthrow the Assad regime, have been killed since January fighting against the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham. The same group the Assad regime empowers financially by purchasing oil from some of the oil fields they control in eastern Syria.
Well, I just want to, Mohammed, I just want to get back to this.
So just one very important message. If it were not for the moderate opposition in Syria, the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham that declared the Khilafah a few days ago, and appointed al-Baghdadi as caliph, they would completely take over Syria. It's thanks to the moderate opposition that this has not happened yet.
But are countries like the United States going to have problems identifying who makes up the moderate opposition? I mean, there already have been reservations expressed here in the United States. I want you to take a listen to what Senator Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat senator from West Virginia, what he had to say. Let's watch.
It's very troubling trying to get pulled in, and maybe we should be taking this side, or the request for $500 million. I have a lot of problems with that, Bob, and I, for one, would not support that unless I see other facts that would prove me wrong.
Does he have a point?
Nothing new about Senator Manchin. This is not the first time he said these things. He's never been very supportive, actually. But there are other senators you may have heard about, making statements that you may have heard about, like Senator Casey, Senator Rubio. They immediately put out statements saying this is absolutely something we should. This is something we should absolutely do. It's it's overdue. We've got to do it.
Okay.
So we're talking Marco Rubio, we're talking Casey, and Senator McCain and others, and of course they are supportive of this. Those on the ground in Syria who are fighting against the Assad regime and fighting against the extremists such as the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham that the Assad regime empowers financially, are well known. You have groups like Harakat Hazm, others, they're well known. The Ambassador Ford, America's point person on Syria for the last 4 years, said, quote, we know them, we've known them for years, we've worked with them before, and there's no reason why we cannot provide them with the tools they need.
Okay, let's get Dr. Abdullah's response to that. Dr. Abdullah?
Yes, I have heard. I think there is either United States and CIA, they know that there is no moderate opposition. This joke and these double standards should stop because not Hazm, not Jaish Islam, they are already not recognizing not democracy, not the human rights, nothing.
Ambassador Robert Ford.
We are fighting against terrorism, and America cannot use.
When was the last time the Assad regime bombed the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham in Syria? Why won't you guys bomb it in Raqqa? Everyone knows their headquarters in Raqqa.
I think we are in a dirty game. When you are in a dirty game, you should not be some kind of a honor person. We are in a very dirty game, and Syria under the aggression from a terrorist organization, which is supported from
it's a dirty game.
Turkey and United States.
I'll give you a chance to
This terrorism should be stopped, and it needs coordination between regional states and Europe and United States.
Okay.
The terrorism will be enter Europe and will targeting the United States itself.
So I'm asking, why wouldn't you bomb the Islamic State?
I've only got a minute left. I want to ask you this. You got this $500 million, $500 million going to, say, moderate groups,
yes,
if that's the case. is it not going to have the effect of actually extending the war and suffering?
Simply because this is what we've been doing over the past 3.5 years, and it's failed miserably, abysmally. The Assad regime, the opposition went to Geneva. They put forth a credible vision for the future of Syria. They said, we're willing to negotiate, and let's talk, let's negotiate, let's discuss these things. The Assad regime said, you're a bunch of terrorists, we won't talk to you. So this political transition was buried in Geneva, and then the Assad regime, with this joke he called elections, appointed himself for another 7 years. So the Assad regime is not interested, and that's what Ibrahimi said. Ibrahimi said in a recent interview to Al Hayat newspaper that the Assad regime has never been interested in political transition in Syria. So if you want to continue with what you have been doing for the past 3.5 years and expect different results, that's a definition of insanity.
Okay, and we are going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Bassam Abu Abdullah talking to us from Damascus, Mohammed Al Ghanem talking to us here in the studio. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
That is it for this edition of The Heat. We would love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. And now you can listen to CCTV America programs 24/7 from anywhere in the United States by simply calling 231-460-1199. I'm Anand, Naidoo in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.